Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us on to our special guest speaker. Our special guest speaker is a lady called Zareen Roohi Ahmed. Zareen and I met just over 2 years ago. In fact, it was about 2 weeks before the first Funding Focus conference kicked off. Zareen and I were both attending a business development program, and we met there and connected and have had a number of conversations over the past 2 years. And she has an incredible story. What we're going to do is we're going to have an extended session. This next session is 40 minutes. And what we're going to do is Zareen gave a incredible TEDx talk, which we are going to broadcast through the Zoom connection. For those of you who get emotional at things, get a box of tissues. I've got one here. I have seen Zareen's TEDx talk half a dozen times. I cried openly the first several times, and I still get damp eyes. It's an incredibly powerful talk. It's called A Mother's Gift to Humanity. It's just under 17 minutes long. We're going to run the TEDx talk, and then I will welcome Zareen live into our Zoom community. So please enjoy the talk. I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully this will work for everyone. I'm just going to share that screen, and I am going to go full screen, and I'm going to hit play, and we have subtitles on. So if your audio isn't coming through, there are subtitles in the talk. Here we are. Enjoy.
There is something magical about the connection between mother and daughter. It's not just that she actually comes from your own body, but that she too is a female. It's like she's a continuation of you. I believe that this relationship is a force of nature that is fueled by your love for her. It powers our maternal instincts and our fertility, and transfers the sacred power of our monthly cycles to our daughters, and they to their daughters. And from this continuum comes all of humanity in a never-ending Fibonacci spiral. But what happens when this sequence is disturbed? Since primary school, my daughter Halima was passionate about charity work. Whenever there was an earthquake somewhere in the world, the next day she would be baking cupcakes to sell them at school to raise money for the cause. She subscribed to UNICEF and had certificates from charities like the Red Cross. I worked in the charity sector too, and together we made a pact that after Halima graduated from university, that the two of us would establish our own charity and ethical business. When Halima was 13, I traveled to Pakistan with my father to visit my sick aunt. And while I was there, I made a plan with my cousin in Karachi to establish a charity in an empty property that he owned to help local street children and orphans. And when I got back and told Halima, she insisted that the charity should have her name associated with it, because she said, you know, that's what I want to do when I grow up, Mum. So the two of us went down to the local Lloyd's TSB bank and we opened an account called the Halima Trust. As it transpired, the Pakistan project didn't go ahead at the time because of red tape and politics over there, but our account was set up ready for when we were ready. 6 years later, Halima, now 19, secured her place to do her dream course of international relations, specialising in third world development at Nottingham Trent University. It was the 26th of November, 2007, just 6 weeks into her course, when Halima was abducted and murdered. Like any parent, if I ever heard a tragic story involving someone's child, I would think that if that ever happened to me, it would finish me. But as it turned out, this test actually gave me such clarity and resilience and strength as I never thought was possible. It made me fearless, perhaps because after facing my worst fear, what else could possibly scare me, right? The most difficult part that will resonate with anyone who has lost someone was that the love that I would have expressed to Halima by laughing with her and hugging her and talking to her now had nowhere to go. Had I suppressed it, kept it within me, I think it would have corroded my insides. It needed to be externalized. I felt that I couldn't just feel love because that was simply too painful. I needed to do love. At first, I just went into autopilot, making sure that everyone else was okay, a bit like being in work crisis management mode. After all, if I lost the plot, what on earth would happen to my son and my husband and our parents? I didn't actually let go of my feelings and let my emotions pour out until many weeks later, in fact. Then I went through a kind of a reawakening phase where I felt that I needed to fulfill that promise that I made to Halima, and all I could think about was doing her work and the work that we were going to do together. Within a few weeks, we had established a charity in Halima's name. Remember the account that we opened? It was called the Halima Trust. And 3 years later, we'd built a school for 400 orphaned and needy girls in Pakistan. It was on my way back from Pakistan in April 2011, having inaugurated the Halima School of Excellence. I was sitting in the airport lounge in Lahore and thinking about the fact that I needed to go back to work. I hadn't earned anything for 3 years. I knew I'd never work for anyone again, and whatever I did, it needed to connect with the charity, so I would keep that connection going with Halima. Sitting there in the lounge, I picked up a magazine, a Time magazine, I think it was, and it opened straight onto this page, this article describing women in the Zatari Syrian refugee camp and how they had to tear strips off the bottom of their clothes to fold up into makeshift sanitary pads, and all the other horrific things that they suffered, and how their kind of womanhood was used against them like a weapon of war. At that moment, I saw myself giving pads to these women. I actually saw mine and Halima's shared purpose in that vision. That was the birth of the Gift Wellness Social Enterprise. I embarked on 18 months of research and development to develop my own range of natural menstrual products and a strategy whereby for every pack I sold, I donated pads to women in refugee camps and homeless women and food banks and schools. My first container of stock arrived in January 2013, and the first thing I did before selling a single pack was that I called up a local charity who I'd heard was taking a container of aid to the Zatari Syrian refugee camp, the same one that I'd read about 18 months before. And I called them up and I asked them to come and collect a number of pallets of my stock to take with them. To my surprise, the guy on the phone said, "Oh, sister, actually, this container is getting filled up with like really important things like food and clothing and medicine. You know, maybe we'll take some of your stuff next time." I asked him where he was, and I drove down there and I sat him down and I asked him to imagine if his mother, his sister, his daughter, his wife were displaced and living as refugees. And no matter what happened, no matter what else was going on, they were going to get their periods. Well, you can imagine, the woman in the headscarf just said the P word. I said, look, the point is that these women that you're taking aid to in the refugee camps are also someone's mother, someone's daughter, someone's sister. He started to cry and he said, gosh, I can't believe that we'd missed such an important part of emergency aid. Needless to say, he sent a truck to my warehouse and filled it with as much product as they could fit in there. And ever since, he's been taking pads to women in crisis in various refugee camps around the world. So I ran my business like this for a few years. The business grew alongside the charity work. Then in 2018, at the time of those all those viral women's rights campaigns, like the #MeToo campaign, and there was that report by Plan International about period poverty in schools, I started to get approached by my customers and friends who wanted to actually get involved in this period poverty work that we were doing. This led us to establish the Gift Wellness Foundation, a registered charity with the sole purpose of eliminating period poverty. And this was my journey for 7 or 8 years, during which time we donated over 6 million menstrual products to women in crisis. Then last year, things took a different turn. It was during the first COVID-19 lockdown. It gave me the opportunity, just like everyone else, to take a step back and assess the impact of our work. And I realized that there was something missing. Yes, it had been healing for me to do this work over these years, but I felt that we weren't addressing the root cause of this thing called period poverty. I felt that we hadn't created actual change. We were just reacting. And especially during the pandemic, things seemed to be getting much, much worse. So I started to peel the layers off this issue, and I realized that at a time when we can talk about everything else, this issue of periods seemed to be the last taboo, the last form of discrimination that was so viscerally rooted in our patriarchal cultural DNA that even women wouldn't admit to it. And I thought, if we as women can't embrace how special and important our reproductive system was and try and normalize the conversation, why should men? How could we demand equal rights when we were still trying to hide the fact that we menstruated? And the more layers I peeled off, the more convinced I was that the rights of women to free menstrual products and to be respected for the fact that they were the ones that carried the responsibility for the reproductive process was one of the most important human rights issues of our time. And I realized that virtually every systemic institution, be it school or the workplace or the army, were built around the natural functionality of men. So I thought, so what if, rather than women having to fit into a system that's designed for men, the working structure synchronized around the natural cycles of women's bodies? And from my research, I found only one organization, female-led of course, called Coexist, that actually implemented successfully a period policy and a period-friendly workplace. So I thought, right, what we need to do is to inject this kind of thinking into the bloodstream of every organization. And it's not like it couldn't happen. didn't that one conversation I had with that charity worker change his mind forever? And believe it or not, I've had my whole family, yes, a traditional Muslim family, complete with long bearded uncles and teenage nephews and nieces and aunties in headscarves, side by side in my warehouse, labeling and packing menstrual products to send off for charity. So I started sort of questioning myself. With 3 sisters, why was it so difficult, so hush-hush to talk about periods in our house while we were growing up? And when I was at school, if a boy in my class had a stomach pain, he would be sent home to rest. But if I had really bad period pains and blood loss, I'd be sent to the nurse who'd throw me a couple of paracetamol and say, "Don't worry, it's just your time of the month." And I remembered being at work and having really bad cramps one day and really not feeling well and making an excuse, actually lying to my boss about why I couldn't deliver a particular presentation, and then walking away thinking, why did I have to lie about that? I wasn't doing anything wrong. Isn't it the basic human right for every woman to be able to menstruate without being ridiculed, bullied, or undermined? We live in an age where every diversity of individual is trying to carve out the kind of future that they want to live in, that fits in with their natural composition. So now is the time for women to create the kind of future that they want to live in. It's time for us, across every sector of society, to embrace the menstrual cycle and go with the flow of our periods at home, at school, and at work, with a respect and understanding of the hormonal changes and the stages that our bodies go through, and the knowledge that this apparent weakness is actually one of the most miraculous and precious gifts in the universe. I hope that my story has conveyed the synonymous relationship between hardship and periods. Both involve pain and difficulty, loss, recovery, and renewal. For me, it goes full circle, all the way back to that idea of passing on that sacred trust, fueled by love, to the next generation. Although in my case, it's not just through my own daughter, but through thousands of daughters who are benefiting from that decision to not just feel love, but to do love. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to introduce you all to my very dear friend, Dr. Zareen Roohi Ahmed. Zareen.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. And thanks everyone. And I apologize if it made anyone emotional. It makes me emotional as well when it was quite a cathartic kind of experience to do that TEDx. And I'm having a similar experience writing my book. I'm almost finished now, thank goodness. But it's it really does. You know, you don't go into your own story, do you, very often, and examine yourself to that extent. I want to know if people have got questions, but before that, I thought it would be a good idea to update you on what has happened since I did that TEDx last year. And because it's been quite a journey, and I've gone through various phases, and I really feel now that what I'm embarking on now is what is the kind of the true purpose, and it's the reason why I everything happened. So, and I really believe that the businesses that that do good or try to do good alongside making their profit, you know, they are the ones that will survive through anything, because people are invested in you. You know, they buy into you and your cause, and especially nowadays. I get that a lot. And when during the pandemic, when I had to completely pivot my business from selling through retail outlets to pivoting it to an online business. I'm talking about selling the products, you know, the physical products. I was amazed by the amount of support that I got from my customers, who were out there looking for us on social media and asking, you know, are we okay? And, you know, what can we do? And sharing our products with other people and sharing our story with other people. So yeah, it's, I think there's a lot to be said for social enterprises and businesses that that incorporate a cause within their business. So what is happening right now is that, I mean, we expanded our range a couple of years ago as well, to incorporate shampoo bars and conditioner bars and body wash, face wash, hand wash, and all that sort of thing, so that you know, because that's what we do toiletries. But like I said, I wanted to get to the root cause of this thing, this period poverty, or this discrimination against women, and I was determined to find a way that we can address the mindset of discrimination, of that kind of, it's a very visceral sort of natural response to women in the workplace, at school, at home, in communities. And we came up with a couple of physical products. One of them is called the period gift box. That was the first step. And the period gift box is something that parents buy for their daughters when they start menstruating. And it's full of lovely, comforting things and lots of information for parents, and chocolate and things like that. And then I thought, okay, so that's kind of schoolgirls, something for schoolgirls. What about women that work? What about women like that, who are going through, you know, scenarios like the example that I shared about when I was going in to give a presentation, and, you know, I realized that I'd started menstruating, and I thought, you know, what am I going to tell my boss? How am I going to get out of this? Because I'm going to humiliate myself otherwise. And, you know, these are, whether it's menstruation, whether it's pregnancy, whether it's the menopause, and everything in between, from endometriosis to polycystic ovaries to whatever, headaches, migraine, all the other things that women naturally, you know, may experience. What can we do about women in the workplace? And I started researching this, and I found I also found that the government had an objective after Brexit to try to increase the number of women within male-dominated industries. And I thought, well, that's going to be interesting, given what, you know, what I was trying to do. So I said, okay, let's target those industries. And the result is that I'm in the process of currently demoing this, and I've got my first contract, and it's completely different to what I was doing before, or what I'm still doing, but it's completely different to selling physical products. We are in the throes of launching our Go Flow consultancy. So we go into STEM industry companies, such as construction companies and engineering, science, technology, and so on. And we do a mapping exercise, and then we do where we identify what the facilities are like for women, what the working conditions are, you know, what the ratio is from men to women, and so on. After this mapping exercise, we then we then do a training in groups of 10 with the staff. And what's different about our training, because you know, diversity training and gender equality training is commonplace in most reputable companies. But what we do is, but what they don't do is they don't touch on this subject. They pussyfoot around gender equality and talk about sexual harassment, the gender pay gap, and all these things, but no one says the P word, and no one talks about the menopause, no one talks about pregnancy, and no one talks about, you know, the fact that every woman goes through this stuff, right?
Yep.
And what do we do in a workplace? So the way that we're addressing that is that in the training, we do the training using VR technology. So we've created these scenarios and we've filmed them using 360 cameras. So you put the headset on and you're in the environment, and you step into the shoes of a woman within that workplace, and you experience what she's going through, whether it's a period situation, whether it's a pregnancy situation or a menopause situation. And you go through the scenario and you have options. You know, do I tell my boss the truth? Do I make up an excuse and say I've got food poisoning? Do I, or do I go through with the presentation and see, you know, hope for the best? And so that's what we're doing. And then we, after the training and the workshop and all of that, we then sit down with the HR departments, and we help them to write their policy based on, you know, the information that we've gathered from the training and the mapping. Fantastic. And we design a new policy. So it's that's what we're doing at the moment.
Brilliant. That's really cool. I mean, we don't have any questions through yet. So please, anyone, if you've got questions for Zareen, please put them in the chat. Taryn said goosebumps, and Jimmy, who's in the middle of moving house, just wrote such an interesting. Whoops, sorry, I had to put down my boxes and couldn't help but listen. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Such an interesting and unique way to get people to stretch the empathy muscle.
Yeah,
and I love what you're doing to bring innovation to things, because yeah, I've worked in big corporates and I've been sent on, you know, D&I training and all of that. And as with many of those big corporate programs, you know, there's some great big program rolled out and you know, you're working in a company with 10,000 people and it's very bleh. And you know, most people come away from these things saying, okay, fine, whatever, you know, the latest corporate initiative, and you know, there'll be another one along in 2 weeks. But I think the approach that you're taking, and you know, the using technology to allow people to really step into a woman's shoes. Yeah, so a few more comments come through. So Geeta, utterly amazing. Thank you, Zareen, for being so fabulous, committed, and inspiring.
Thank you.
Maxine, absolutely innovative. Bahar, you're great. Thanks for raising these issues. Maxine, again, yeah, not the traditional D&I policy. Sarah, this is a wonderful story, so authentic, and what a way to celebrate your daughter. And I agree. And, you know, I have 2 daughters, and as you said in your talk, I can't imagine what you went through, and yet to see the strength and the resilience that you developed. And the bit that I always cry about is when you talk about doing love, because love is a verb.
Yeah.
And it's just such a powerful thing that you've done. So if anybody has any questions for Zareen, please do put them in the chat. Where to next?
So, well, we're currently demoing this in a construction company that's working in Canary Wharf, and they're part of a much bigger, a huge sector of the construction industry. And then we're also looking at engineering companies, where, I mean, we've opened a bit of a can of worms. It's opening new doors all over the place, and I'm really excited because for once we're actually addressing root causes as opposed to just addressing the symptoms and trying to help people who are victims. You know, which is still very important. And, you know, we've donated millions of pounds and we continue to do that. And we still donate from every pack we sell, we donate. And the environmental stuff is very important. I want to encourage a kind of, to make it uncool to have plastic bottles in your bathroom, because you don't need them. You know, I wash my hair today with a shampoo bar, you know, and it works just as well. And you don't need to be throwing away all of that plastic, because a truck full of plastic enters the sea every minute of every day. Yeah.
Well, which is a foreshadowing to one of our later speakers. Okay. But yeah, no, you're absolutely correct.
And so I guess gift wellness it's a gift on many, many levels, and gift is the best word that I could have found, you know, for my brand, because it is a gift on every level. It's a gift to my daughter. It's a gift to the environment. It's a gift to the women who receive our products, and it just continues to give. And it's a gift to me because it's been more than just a survival strategy. It's what I say to everyone who, I'm working with a lot of young people at the moment. I've got Kickstarters, you know, the Kickstart scheme. Yep. And so many young people have got mental health problems at the moment. And I do this thing called timeline coaching with them. It's an NLP thing to help them to get over trauma and things like that. And what I say to them is that, you know, you think that this test that you've been tested with, was such a great test, such a big test, that it's finishing, it's going to damage you to the point where you can't be fixed. But in actual fact, the bigger your test is, the better it will make you, the better you will become. And that's the lesson that, you know, that I've learned from this. It's that the bigger the test, the better you will be. Yep. As a result of it. I have no doubt in that, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. We've had another comment through from Joel saying, thank you so much, Dr. Zareen. Please reach out to Win Trade Global, which is a women's network. I actually know the founder of Win Trade Global, Yvonne Thompson. So I will introduce you to her.
Yeah.
I'll do that offline. I'll just make a note here.
Thanks, Joel.
Zareen.
Does anyone have any questions? Because I love answering questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Anything.
This is your opportunity, people. Post a question.
What I'll leave you with then is.
I was gonna. Sorry, Dr. Zareen. Just really very inspirational story. one thing I'm starting to hear people talk more about, particularly as you kind of now the openness around your kind of your journey in the menstrual product and supporting the Syrian refugees and how that's kind of developed. But one thing in terms of kind of the women's agenda that I'm hearing more about is kind of focusing now on the menopause. Are you in the process of kind of creating something around that? I know the focus is on kind of GoFlow and the VR, which sounds brilliant. I think to David's point, actually being in a situation, particularly large corporate, and if you're doing that in the construction sector and it works well, my word, that'll work. I don't want to kind of stereotype, but I think it would work well anywhere. But what about the menopause?
So our VR training and the GoFlow project covers the menopause as well, and covers pregnancy and everything to do with a woman's reproductive system from start to finish. So we have a scenario which is a menopausal woman and what she's going through. I mean, to tell you the truth, I've recently gone through that myself, and I'll tell you one thing, if I'd been in a job and working for someone last year, I would have left. And that's a tragedy, because and it's one of the reasons why there are so few women leaders in organizations, I'm convinced, because women will work their way up through, throughout their careers. They're gaining all that experience and knowledge and wisdom, and then when it gets to the point where they are the age and at the right stage to become the directors and to sit on those boards and really reach the powerful positions in those organizations, the menopause hits, and then they either have to scale back or they leave and they retire early, and it's one of the reasons why there are very few women leaders in these organizations. So
really,
the thing that we want to change, but if we could change actually flex the system around women rather than women having to fit into a system that's designed for men and always was, why not? The lockdown and the pandemic has, if nothing else, has taught us that we can work from home very effectively, that we can be flexible. Many people are choosing to work from home now rather than having to go into an office. And if you are having hot flushes and you're feeling that all the menopausal symptoms, from fatigue to hot flushes to the mood swings and all of that, which happen very suddenly. I've been in meetings on Zoom calls where, thank God I've been at home, because I have to glug down half a pint of water, and just kind of take a breather, because I'm having such a painful, experience. Hot flushes aren't just about feeling hot. They can be very painful and really horrible and really knock you out of your focus, so, but you get through it. But during that phase, and thank God I'm through it now. But during that phase, you are in jeopardy. You can. That's the point. If you don't have the support, then you can lose your job, or you're forced out in some way, sidelined. You won't get those promotions. You won't have those opportunities. So it's critical.
Thank you, Zareen. We've had a couple of, and thank you, Greg. We've had a couple of questions come through on the chat. We're sort of running out of time, but I'm going to make an executive decision and carry on for another couple of questions because this is such an interesting thing. So Jimmy's come back just saying, destigmatizing these issues is so vital. We shouldn't be afraid to have these important conversations. Events and moments like this make me so hopeful for future generations. And Sarah said, I 100% agree with this. I had very similar experience. So Drew wrote, what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs today?
My advice would be, firstly, that, from when I started my business, and I hadn't done business before, it was a different time. The technology wasn't there. It was quite expensive to set up a business, whereas now anyone can, everything is at our fingertips, and there are so many resources that you can use. And again, my number one advice for everyone would be to incorporate the humanity side of your business. And if you focus on a cause, I have an acronym that I use, which is GIFT, of course. And when I'm training and things like that, and G stands for gratitude. It's about being grateful even for what you're tested with. And I is for illustrating your vision, putting it down on paper, writing it down, and visualizing it. And F is for focusing on a cause and becoming fanatical about it, and really sort of visualizing it. And T is for trusting in your own abilities, and the fact that if you're doing something good, then you can't lose, and sticking to it. So, I mean, I've just gone through them very quickly, but we go into great detail, and that's what it'll be in the book in more detail.
Thank you so much. And then one last question before we break off for the breakout sessions. From Thibaut, do you think virtual reality is still before its time, or are you seeing it being embraced in the workplace?
I think it's going to be one of the number one tools for training very quickly, and it's already showing that. It's a great way for what we're using it for. As someone said earlier, it's a wonderful way of creating empathy, because you're immersed and you're experiencing what the person is. It's a sort of a first-hand experience almost.
Yeah.
The only thing missing is sort of the pain. So we're thinking about how we tackle that. Maybe we give them a punch in the stomach while they've got their headsets on. I don't know. But,
Brilliant. Brilliant. And then we just had one last comment from Maxine. Thank you, Dr. Zareen. You're a gift.
Oh, bless you. Yes.
So, Zareen, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. It's such a powerful story. And
thank you for inviting me, David.
Oh, my pleasure. And I hope you can stick around for the breakout and to see some of our other speakers.
Yeah, sure.
If they're available. Wonderful.